Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into mental health.
It's such a timely topic,
Yeah.
and it's so important, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like everybody's talking about it, but I think maybe we don't all fully grasp just how wide-reaching it is and how many aspects of
Mhm.
our lives it really touches.
It really is fascinating when you start to peel back the layers.
Yeah, and you gave me a really interesting set of sources to dive into for this.
Yeah.
We've got reports, articles, even a couple of like personal reflections.
It's always good to get those different perspectives.
Yeah, and the focus seems to be like the connection between mental health and overall well-being, but then also that idea of resilience, which I'm
Yeah.
really curious to.
Oh, resilience is key. And I think the sources you've got will give us a lot to unpack there.
Awesome. Okay, so should we just jump right in?
Let's dive in.
I think one of the first things that struck me, even just glancing at these sources, is
Yep.
how mental health is actually defined.
Yeah, it's not just a simple definition, is it? No, it's so much more than just like the absence of mental illness, which I think is maybe how some people think about it.
Right, and one of the reports uses this phrase, a state of holistic well-being.
Oh, I like that.
It really captures the breadth of it.
Yeah, and it goes on to say that mental health impacts everything from our emotions to our thoughts, our behaviors, the way we handle stress, even how we build relationships and make choices.
It's really all-encompassing.
So it's not static then. It's something that evolves throughout our life.
Absolutely. Think of it like physical health. You don't just one day become healthy and then that's it, you're done.
Yeah.
You have to keep working at it, right? Mental health is similar.
Makes sense. You've got to keep up with the mental workouts.
Exactly. Different stages of life, different challenges, different approaches.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding mental illness. It's about actively cultivating this state of well-being.
That's the goal. And one of the articles does a really great job of connecting mental health to that broader concept of wellness.
Okay, I'm interested. How do they make that link?
Well, they basically present mental health as the foundation for every other aspect of well-being.
I can see that. If your foundation is shaky, everything else is going to be off kilter, right?
Precisely. And one of the first areas where this connection is super evident is emotional regulation.
Oh, that's a big one.
Huge. If you're not managing your emotions effectively, it impacts your relationships, your ability to deal with stress, even just your overall sense of contentment.
Yeah, when I'm super stressed out or anxious, I definitely notice that I'm way more likely to snap at people or just make kind of impulsive decisions I regret later.
Right. And it affects your sleep, your energy levels, everything. It's like a domino effect.
Totally. So it's not just in my head, it's actually impacting my physical well-being too.
Exactly. Your sources make it really clear that there's this strong link between mental and physical health.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, for instance, chronic stress or anxiety can actually contribute to things like heart disease or a weakened immune system, even digestive issues.
Wow, okay. I didn't realize it was that connected.
It's pretty powerful and often overlooked, but it makes sense when you think about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, if your body's in a constant state of fight or flight, it's bound to wear down.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's the physical side of it. But your sources also talk about how mental health impacts things like your overall quality of life.
Interesting. In what way?
Well, think about it. When your mental health is strong, you're more likely to, engage in healthy behaviors, build strong connections with others, find meaning in what you do. Essentially, you're better equipped to just enjoy life.
So it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.
Exactly. And there's one more piece to this mental health as a foundation idea that your sources touch on, which is the impact on cognitive function.
Okay, explain that one to me.
Basically, how well you're able to think clearly, to problem solve, make good decisions, even just focus and learn new things. All of that is influenced by your mental well-being.
Really? So if my mental health is struggling, it's going to be that much harder to, think straight and make good choices.
It can definitely make those things more challenging.
Okay, this is feeling pretty important now.
It is. And understanding these connections is a big step towards taking control. But beyond just functioning well, strong mental health is also the bedrock of resilience.
Oh, that's what I was really interested in. That's the part that I think intrigues a lot of people. How does mental health actually help us bounce back from challenges and setbacks?
That's where it gets really interesting. One of your sources uses this phrase, mental strength helps us stay grounded during tough times.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
So how do we actually get that mental strength?
Well, they break it down into a few key components. First up is coping skills.
Coping skills. Okay.
When our mental health is strong, we develop healthy ways to manage stress, deal with loss, overcome those setbacks. It's like having a whole toolkit for navigating difficult situations.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about being prepared to handle the bad times too.
Exactly. And the tools in that toolkit are going to be different for everyone.
Like what kind of tools are we talking about?
Well, for some people, it's mindfulness practices like meditation or deep breathing. Others find that physical activity is their go-to. Could be running, yoga, just getting out in nature, really anything that helps you release stress and clear your head.
I'm a big walker, so I can definitely see how that would help.
And of course, we can't forget about the power of connection. Talking to a friend, a therapist, someone who can listen and offer support.
It's amazing how much just talking things out can help sometimes.
It really can. And then there are things like creative outlets, journaling, anything that helps you process your emotions in a healthy way.
So it's about finding what works for you and building those coping skills up.
Exactly. The key is to do this before you're in the middle of a crisis. Otherwise, it's like trying to learn to swim when you're already in the deep end.
Okay, I'm getting the picture. So proactive coping skill development is essential for resilience. What about self-esteem and confidence? Where do those fit in?
Well, remember that phrase, mental strength helps us stay grounded. Self-esteem and confidence are like the anchors that keep us steady.
I like that. So when we believe in ourselves, we're less likely to be knocked off course by challenges.
Exactly. You approach things with a can-do attitude. Setbacks become opportunities for growth rather than, personal failures.
That makes sense. But building self-esteem can be tough.
It can be a journey, for sure. It involves challenging those negative thoughts we all have. That inner critic that likes to point out our flaws.
Oh, I know that voice well.
We all do. But we don't have to listen to it. Focus on your strengths, celebrate your wins, surround yourself with people who believe in you.
It's like actively choosing to focus on the positive.
Exactly. It takes practice, but it's so worth it. Now, are you ready for one that might surprise you?
Get me with it.
Emotional flexibility.
Emotional flexibility. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's another key element of resilience that your sources highlight.
What is that exactly?
Think of it like this. Let's say you're working on a project you're really passionate about, and it gets rejected. Emotional flexibility means you can allow yourself to feel the disappointment, the frustration, maybe even some sadness. But instead of letting those feelings completely derail you, you acknowledge them, you learn from the experience, and you adapt.
So it's not about pretending those negative emotions don't exist. It's about being able to process them without getting stuck.
Exactly. It's like riding the waves of emotion, both the good and the bad, and coming out the other side.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Coping skills help us manage the stress. Self-esteem gives us that confidence to face the challenges, and emotional flexibility helps us deal with the inevitable ups and downs.
You got it. And there's one more essential piece, which is social support.
Oh yeah, having people we can rely on.
Your sources really emphasize that. Positive mental health makes us more likely to both seek and accept help when we need it. And those strong relationships become lifelines during times of adversity.
I can definitely attest to that. When I went through a rough patch a few years ago, it was my friends and family that got me through.
That's the power of human connection. It's fundamental to our well-being.
This is all so insightful. It feels like we've barely scratched the surface, though.
We've laid a good foundation. But before we go deeper, I think it's important to widen the lens a bit and look at mental health from a more global perspective.
Okay, I'm ready for a wider view. What are we focusing on?
We're going to delve into the World Health Organization's Action Plan for Mental Health. It's a pretty remarkable document that lays out a bold vision for improving mental well-being on a global scale.
Global mental health. Okay, this is fascinating. What are some of the key takeaways?
Well, one of the most significant points is the emphasis on mental health as a human right. They're advocating for services and policies that uphold the dignity and rights of all individuals.
Wow, that's huge. So it's not just a personal issue, it's about social justice, too.
Exactly. And building on that, they stress the need for community-based care, moving away from institutionalization and towards integrated services that are more accessible and less stigmatizing.
So instead of isolating people, the focus is on supporting them within their communities.
Exactly. It's a much more humane and effective approach.
What else does the plan highlight?
Well, prevention and promotion are also key. They're advocating for early intervention, building resilience from a young age, and addressing those social factors that can influence mental health.
So it's not just about treating illness, it's about creating a world where people are less likely to get sick in the first place.
That's the goal. They're really pushing for a fundamental shift in how we view and approach mental health globally.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've talked about mental health as the foundation for well-being, and we've touched on this global perspective. But before we move on, I think it's important to make sure we're all clear on the difference between mental health and mental illness.
You're absolutely right. That's a crucial distinction.
I think I understand the basics, but I'm definitely ready for a deeper dive.
Okay, so remember, mental health refers to our overall emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It's how we feel, think, and behave in our everyday lives.
So it's the day-to-day experience of our mental state.
Exactly. Mental illness, on the other hand, refers to those diagnosable conditions like depression or anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, things like that.
Okay, so those are the specific conditions that can disrupt our lives and often require professional help.
That's a good way to put it. Mental health is the broader umbrella, and mental illness refers to those specific conditions that fall under it.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think that's a great place to pause for now.
I agree. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, you, dear listener, are getting a really good sense of just how vast this topic is and how important it is to all of us.
We're just getting started, and I'm excited to explore even more in our next segment.
I'm ready for more. But for now, let those ideas percolate a bit. We'll be back soon with more of the deep dive. All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, I feel like we're really getting into some juicy stuff here. Before we took a break, we were talking about how mental health is like the foundation for a really fulfilling life.
And how it affects everything from our emotions to our physical health.
Even our thought processes.
Right. And then we started getting into that fascinating idea of resilience.
Yeah, how mental well-being gives us those tools to deal with challenges and bounce back from all the setbacks that life inevitably throws our way.
Exactly. It's like building that inner strength to weather the storms.
And we touched on some of the key elements of resilience, like those coping skills, self-esteem, emotional flexibility, and of course, having that strong support system.
It's like assembling a toolkit, to help you navigate those tough times.
Absolutely. And I think one of the tools that we talked about that I really want to dig a little deeper into is those coping skills.
Oh, coping skills are essential. They're what help us manage stress and those difficult emotions.
But there are so many different types, right? Like, where do we even begin? What are some concrete examples of healthy coping mechanisms?
Well, and that's the beauty of it. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's really about finding what works best for you.
So it's not about searching for that magic bullet solution. It's more about personalizing it.
Exactly. What works for one person might not work for another. For some people, mindfulness practices like meditation or deep breathing exercises, those can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, creating a sense of calm in the middle of chaos.
Exactly. Just finding that stillness within.
I've tried meditation a few times, and I can definitely see how that could be beneficial, especially when you feel like you're about to lose it.
Right. Just taking a few moments to pause and breathe can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. What about other coping mechanisms?
Well, for others, physical activity is their go-to. Exercise releases endorphins, which have mood-boosting effects, and it can be a great way to channel all that pent-up energy or frustration.
I'm a big believer in that. I find that whenever I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, a good run or just getting out for a walk can really clear my head.
It's like hitting the reset button, right?
Totally.
And, it doesn't even have to be structured exercise. Even just taking a walk in nature can be incredibly restorative. Studies have shown that spending time outdoors can help reduce stress hormones and improve your overall sense of well-being.
I love that. It's like nature therapy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the power of human connection.
Oh, yeah. Talking it out.
Sometimes just venting to a trusted friend or family member, someone who listens without judgment, can be so helpful when processing those difficult emotions.
I agree. Sometimes you just need to get things off your chest.
Right. And it helps to have that outside perspective, someone to offer support, and maybe even a different way of looking at things.
And sometimes it's not even about getting advice. It's just about feeling heard and understood.
Exactly. And then there are those creative outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Things like journaling, painting, playing music, anything that allows you to express yourself.
I've heard journaling can be really therapeutic.
It can be a great way to get those thoughts and feelings out of your head and onto paper.
Yeah, like a way to process everything that's going on internally.
Exactly. So, there's a whole range of coping skills out there. The key is to find what works for you and to start practicing them regularly.
But it seems like the key is to develop these skills before you actually need them, right? It's like having that toolkit ready to go when life throws those inevitable curveballs.
That's the ideal scenario for sure. It's much harder to start building those coping mechanisms when you're already in the midst of a crisis.
It's like trying to learn how to swim when you're already in the deep end.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. So being proactive with those coping skills is really key for resilience.
Okay, I'm definitely getting that message. So we've talked about coping skills, but what about self-esteem and confidence? Where do those fit into the resilience picture?
Remember that phrase we mentioned earlier? Mental strength helps us stay grounded during tough times.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
Well, I think self-esteem and confidence are like the anchors that keep us steady in those storms.
That's a great analogy. So when our self-esteem is strong, we're less likely to be blown off course by those inevitable setbacks and challenges.
Exactly. When you believe in yourself and your abilities, you're more likely to approach obstacles with a can-do attitude.
I can see that. It's like having that inner voice that says, hey, I can handle this.
Right. You see those setbacks as opportunities for growth rather than personal failures.
So it's about reframing those negative experiences into something positive.
It's a mindset shift for sure.
Yeah.
But building self-esteem, that can be a challenge for some people.
Oh, definitely. Any tips on how to cultivate more self-esteem and confidence?
Well, one of the most important things is to challenge those negative thoughts that can really chip away at our self-worth.
You know, that inner critic that we were talking about earlier?
Exactly. We all have that voice in our heads, but we don't have to let it run the show.
So it's about recognizing those negative thoughts and choosing not to believe them.
Exactly. It takes practice, but over time, you can learn to replace those negative messages with more positive and realistic ones.
So it's like retraining our brains to focus on the good rather than dwelling on the negative.
Exactly. And it also helps to focus on your strengths and your accomplishments. Celebrate your wins, big or small.
That's a good reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in what we haven't done yet or where we've fallen short, but it's important to acknowledge those successes too.
Absolutely. Give yourself credit where credit is due. And don't be afraid to surround yourself with people who believe in you and support your growth. Having a positive and encouraging support system can make a world of difference.
It's like having your own personal cheer squad.
Exactly. Now, are you ready to move on to that intriguing concept of emotional flexibility?
Yes, I'm still so curious about this one. What does emotional flexibility actually look like in real life?
Okay, so imagine you're applying for a job that you really want. You put a ton of effort into your application, you nail the interview, but then you don't get the job. Emotional flexibility means allowing yourself to feel the disappointment, the frustration, maybe even some sadness. But instead of letting those feelings completely consume you, you acknowledge them, you learn from the experience, and then you move on.
So it's not about suppressing those negative emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's more about processing them in a healthy way.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging those feelings, allowing yourself to experience them, but not letting them derail you.
It's like riding the waves of emotion, both the good and the bad, and coming out the other side.
That's a great way to put it. It's about learning to surf those emotional waves.
I love that analogy. So emotional flexibility is all about resilience and adaptability.
Exactly. And this is where mindfulness practices can really come in handy. By learning to observe our emotions without judgment, we can become less reactive and more resilient in the face of challenges.
It's like creating that space between ourselves and our emotions so that we're not completely ruled by them.
Exactly. It's about becoming the observer rather than getting swept away by the current.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Coping skills, self-esteem, emotional flexibility, they all contribute to our overall resilience.
They do. And we can't forget about social support. We touched on this briefly earlier, but it's worth emphasizing how vital those strong relationships are for navigating life's challenges.
I think most people understand that having people we can rely on is important, but it's helpful to hear it reinforced. What is it about social support that makes us more resilient?
Well, first and foremost, it provides a sense of belonging and connection. We're social creatures, we thrive on connection. And knowing that we're not alone, that we have people who care about us and have our backs, that can make all the difference in the world.
It's like having a safety net, knowing that there are people who will catch you if you fall.
Exactly. And it's not just about receiving support, it's about giving it too. When we reach out and offer support to others, it strengthens our own resilience and helps to create a sense of community.
So it's a two-way street. We all need support at times, and we all have something to offer.
Exactly. It's a beautiful cycle of giving and receiving. Now, before we move on to our final thoughts on mental health and well-being, there's one more important point that I want to bring up, and it's the idea that mental health needs should be considered across the lifespan.
Oh, that's interesting. I think we tend to focus on mental health in adults, but it's obviously important for children and adolescents too.
Absolutely. One of the sources you provided actually highlighted how crucial those early childhood experiences are in shaping our mental health later in life.
It makes sense, right? Those early experiences really lay the foundation for how we view ourselves in the world around us.
Exactly. And then, of course, adolescence is a time of immense change and development, so it's a really critical period.
There's so much going on during those teenage years. The social pressures, academic stress, trying to figure out who you are.
It's a lot to navigate. So creating safe and supportive environments where young people feel comfortable talking about their feelings and seeking help when they need it, that's so important.
It's about normalizing those conversations and making mental health a priority.
Exactly.
Mm.
And as we move into adulthood, the focus often shifts to things like managing stress, building healthy relationships, finding purpose and meaning in our work and personal lives.
It seems like there's a lot of overlap with the resilience factors we've been talking about.
There is. Those skills are important at every stage of life. And as we get older, we might face additional challenges related to aging, things like cognitive decline or physical health issues. And it's important to address those challenges in a way that supports mental well-being.
I never really thought about it that way, but it makes perfect sense. Mental health is truly a lifelong journey.
It is, and it's a journey worth taking.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm gaining a much broader perspective on what mental health really means and how we can cultivate it at every stage of life.
That's great to hear. And you, dear listener, have clearly done your homework on this topic. With all those amazing sources you've provided, we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore.
I can't wait to dive into the next layer. But for now, maybe we should take a pause and give everyone a chance to reflect on what we've discussed so far.
That sounds a good plan. We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive into mental health.
Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. As we've been talking about all this stuff about mental health, I keep thinking about one thing.
What's that?
It's like the elephant in the room, We're talking about all this important stuff, how to build resilience and all, but there's this one thing that keeps coming up in my mind and in the sources too.
You're talking about stigma, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. It's like this invisible barrier that keeps people from getting help or even just talking about what they're going through.
It's such a huge problem, and it prevents so many people from getting the support they need.
It's like if you break your leg, everyone's like, oh no, go to the doctor. But if you're
Struggling with anxiety or depression?
like, you're supposed to just suck it up and deal with it on your own.
Right. Like it's a sign of weakness or something?
It's this deeply ingrained societal thing, and it's one of the biggest challenges we face.
So how do we even begin to tackle something like that? It feels so big.
Well, one of the most powerful tools we have is education.
Education, okay.
The more we understand about mental health, what it is, how it affects us, the less likely we are to, buy into those harmful stereotypes.
Makes sense. It's hard to be afraid of something when you understand it, right?
Exactly. And education starts with conversation. We need to talk about mental health more openly.
I think people are getting better at that, which is good.
Yeah, but we still have a long way to go. And it's not just about talking, it's about how we talk.
Oh yeah, the language we use. One of the articles actually talks about that, how the words we choose can really impact how we perceive mental health.
Give me an example.
Well, instead of saying someone is schizophrenic, we can say they have schizophrenia.
It's like the difference between saying someone is cancer versus has cancer.
Right. It puts the focus on the person rather than the diagnosis.
That's a really good point. And I guess we should avoid those really stigmatizing terms, like crazy or insane.
Absolutely. Those words are so loaded and just perpetuate negative stereotypes.
Okay, so being mindful of our language is one step. What else can we do to fight stigma?
I think empathy is huge.
Empathy, yeah.
Putting ourselves in the shoes of those who are struggling.
Trying to understand what it's really like to live with a mental health challenge.
Exactly. And remembering that it can happen to anyone.
It's not a sign of weakness, it's just part of the human experience.
Exactly. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And sometimes it needs a little extra care.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about education, empathy. What about actually supporting people who are struggling?
That's where being an ally comes in. Listening without judgment, offering encouragement, advocating for better resources.
Creating that sense of community where everyone feels safe and supported.
Exactly. Even small gestures of kindness can make a big difference. A listening ear, a kind word, a willingness to learn.
This has been such a great conversation. I feel like I've learned so much, not just about mental health itself, but also about the whole social context surrounding it.
Me too. It's been a real deep dive, and I think you, dear listener, deserve a round of applause for bringing such thought-provoking sources to the table.
Seriously, you've given us so much to think about.
As we wrap up, the one message I want to leave everyone with is this. You are not alone. We all have mental health, and we all have the capacity to cultivate well-being and resilience.
And there's help available if you need it. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Absolutely. Taking care of your mental well-being is a gift to yourself and to everyone around you.
That's a beautiful way to put it. This has been an inspiring deep dive, and I want to thank everyone for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep diving deep.